If she doesn't make it, the house is already in my name. It will all be over soon. The words were spoken quietly, almost as a whisper. Calm. Calculated. Cold. They echoed through a hospital hallway where a young woman's life was hanging by a thread. Years later, Nurse Tasha Odom would remember that night for one reason, not the frantic alarms, not the shouting doctors, not the sound of rushing footsteps. She remembered the silence. The specific kind of silence that only appears when people stop pretending to care. Room 7 at Harlow Medical Center had been in chaos since midnight. Dr. Simone Adme, a 33-year-old specialist in high-risk pregnancies, had already been working for 19 exhausting hours. Her feet ached, her shoulders burned, and exhaustion pressed heavily against her body. But none of that mattered. She never guessed. She never panicked. She simply stayed. Inside room 7 lay 27-year-old Maya Briggs. She was 39 weeks pregnant when she arrived just after midnight with a sudden placental tear that progressed far faster than anyone expected. By 2 o'clock in the morning, her blood pressure had begun falling in the slow, frightening way every experienced doctor recognized. It was the kind of decline that meant time was running out. By 3:45 a.m., everyone in the room understood they were standing at the edge of what modern medicine could do. Then, at exactly 3:47, the heart monitor went flat. She's coding. Dr. Adme didn't hesitate. Start compressions. Within seconds she was performing CPR while another doctor prepared emergency medication. The crash team burst through the doors less than a minute later. Outside room 7, 3 people waited. They had been sitting there since shortly after 1 in the morning. Long enough for the night shift nurses to notice something strange. Not because they were crying. Not because they were worried. Because they looked strangely comfortable. Almost like people waiting for something they had already decided was going to happen. The first was Maya's husband, Dex Briggs. 31 years old. Well-dressed. Confident. The kind of man who entered every room expecting everyone else to adjust around him. Earlier that night, he'd stepped into Maya's room, kissed her forehead, squeezed her hand once, whispered that everything would be okay, and then immediately walked back into the hallway to make phone calls. Since then, he had spent more time staring at his phone than at the operating room doors. Standing beside him was a woman wearing a green satin blouse. Her name was Farah. When she arrived, Dex casually introduced her as his cousin visiting from out of town. But Nurse Tasha noticed something impossible to ignore. Whenever the hallway emptied, Dex's hand naturally found the small of Farah's back. Not the way cousins stood together. The way lovers forgot people might be watching. On Dex's other side stood his mother, Ranetta Briggs. Elegant. Expensively dressed. Gold earrings. A soft cashmere cardigan draped over her shoulders. She carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent an entire lifetime getting exactly what she wanted. When doctors first explained Maya's condition, Ranetta hadn't looked frightened. She had looked annoyed. As though someone had interrupted an important dinner reservation. Dr. Adme had noticed all 3 of them during a brief update around 1:30 a.m. Something about them stayed with her. She couldn't explain why, but years of treating people had taught her one lesson: sometimes your instincts notice things before your mind fully understands them. At 3:52 a.m., Dr. Adme stepped back into the hallway. Her surgical gown was stained. Her face remained calm, but exhaustion showed around her eyes. Dex immediately stood. "Doctor, is she okay?" Dr. Adme looked directly at him. "We lost her heartbeat at 3:47. His face froze. "We're doing everything possible to bring her back." For one brief second, something crossed Dex's face. Nurse Tasha saw it clearly. It wasn't grief. It looked like relief that had arrived too early and quickly disguised itself as concern. Then it disappeared. Farah immediately reached for his arm. Ranetta spoke first. "What about the baby?" "We're fighting for both of them," Dr. Adme answered firmly before turning and disappearing back into room 7. The hallway fell silent. Tasha returned to her paperwork, but something felt wrong. A few moments later, she heard voices. Low. Careful. But not careful enough. Dex leaned closer to his mother. If she doesn't make it. He glanced toward room 7. The house automatically goes back into my name. I had everything changed last October. Ranata barely moved. A faint smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Finally, she whispered. About time. Farah didn't say a single word. She simply adjusted the strap of her purse and stared impatiently at the operating room doors. Not with fear. Not with hope. With impatience. As though she were waiting for a delayed flight instead of news about another woman's life. Tasha's fingers froze above her chart. She slowly lowered her pen. On the other side of those doors, doctors were risking everything to save Maya Briggs. Outside, her own husband was quietly discussing property ownership. For several long seconds, Tasha simply watched them. Then she picked up her pen again. She didn't interrupt. She didn't accuse anyone. She simply remembered every word. Inside room 7, the battle continued. Minutes passed. Every second felt heavier than the one before. Dr. Admi refused to stop. 36 relentless minutes of CPR, medication, defibrillation, and blood transfusions. Every possible intervention. Sweat soaked through her surgical cap. Her arms trembled from exhaustion. Her lungs burned beneath her mask. Several members of the team exchanged hopeless glances. But Dr. Admi never gave the order to stop. Again, she said. One more round. Silence. Then, a tiny flutter appeared on the monitor. Almost invisible. Then another. Another. Finally, a steady heartbeat returned. No one cheered. Hospitals are rarely dramatic. Instead, everyone simply released the breath they had been holding. For the first time in nearly 40 minutes, Dr. Admi allowed herself one slow inhale. She closed her eyes for barely a second. Not in celebration. In gratitude. Then she looked toward the second monitor beside Maya's bed. Her expression changed. She stared at the screen. 5 seconds. 10. 20. 30. Without saying a word, she quietly called, Tasha. The nurse walked over immediately. What is it? Dr. Admi pointed toward the monitor. Tasha looked. Then looked again. Her eyes widened. Does the family know? Dr. Admi slowly shook her head. No. A brief pause followed. Not yet. The weight behind those two words filled the room with a different kind of silence. Outside, Maya's family believed the worst was almost over. Inside, everything was about to change. At exactly 4:31 a.m., Dr. Simone Admi stepped back into the hallway. Dex was the first to stand. His eyes searched her face before she even spoke. She's alive, Dr. Admi said calmly. For 2 long seconds, no one reacted. The silence stretched just a little too long. Then, almost as if someone had silently reminded them what was expected, the emotions appeared. Oh, thank God, Dex breathed. The words were right. The expression was almost right. But to Nurse Tasha, who had been watching people for more than 15 years, it came 1 second too late. Relief had been performed. Not felt. Ranata stepped forward. When can we see her? Not yet, Dr. Admi replied. She's unconscious, and her condition is still extremely fragile. She paused, then looked directly at all 3 of them. There's something else we need to discuss. All 3 of you. She motioned toward the consultation room at the end of the corridor. The small room with the round table and the untouched box of tissues. The room where families either lost hope or found it. Without another word, Dex, Farah, and Ranata followed her inside. Nurse Tasha stayed exactly where she was. Officially, she was finishing patient charts. Unofficially, she couldn't stop watching. The consultation room had a large glass window facing the nurse's station. She couldn't hear a single word, but she didn't need to. She watched Dr. Admi speak. Dex's confident expression slowly disappeared. Farah's face lost its color. Ranata instinctively reached for the gold chain around her neck and gripped it tightly. Whatever Dr. Admi had just told them, it wasn't the news they had expected. Inside the room, Dr. Admi spoke with the same calm professionalism she had carried throughout the night. Maya is alive, she began. And so are both of your children. None of them spoke. Dr. Admi continued. Maya wasn't carrying one baby. She was carrying twins. The silence became almost unbearable. Dr. Admi folded her hands together. The second baby had been identified during an early scan, but because of an extremely rare position behind the larger twin, every emergency image during labor focused on the baby closest to delivery. I've monitored both babies carefully since the 21st week of pregnancy. She looked directly at Dex. During the emergency cesarean section, both girls were safely delivered. She slid 2 medical reports across the table. The pressure relief from delivering both babies gave Maya's heart the chance we desperately needed. Twin weighs 3 pounds, 11 ounces. She's receiving breathing support in the NICU. Twin B weighs 4 pounds, 1 ounce. She's breathing completely on her own. Both girls are expected to survive. And their mother is expected to survive as well. No one celebrated. Instead, Dex stared at the paperwork as though he were reading a language he no longer understood. His mind had clearly been somewhere else only minutes earlier. Now every calculation had collapsed. Ranata remained perfectly still, the color slowly draining from her face. Farah lowered her eyes. For the first time that entire night, she looked uncomfortable. Dr. Admi had delivered enough difficult news to recognize genuine emotion. This wasn't relief. It was disappointment struggling to hide itself. She let the silence linger. Sometimes silence revealed more truth than questions ever could. Finally she spoke again. I want to make one thing absolutely clear. Her voice became firmer. Your wife survived. She looked directly at Dex. Both of your daughters survived. They will all need your full support in the weeks ahead. She deliberately emphasized the words, your wife, your daughters, your support. No one answered. After a few moments, the meeting ended. Dex left first. His phone was already in his hand before he reached the hallway. He unlocked it, locked it again, and unlocked it once more. His hands were no longer steady. Ranata followed behind him without saying a word. She still clutched the gold chain around her neck as though trying to convince herself everything was still under control. Farah walked out last. She didn't look at Dex, and Dex didn't look at her. Whatever had existed between them, the news inside that room had changed it. Then something happened that Tasha would never forget. Instead of walking toward room 7. Instead of asking to see his wife, instead of asking about his newborn daughters, Dex turned toward the elevators. Without a single glance back, he pressed the button. The elevator doors opened. He stepped inside and disappeared. Tasha watched the doors close. Only then did she quietly walk toward room 7 and stop in the doorway. The room looked completely different now. The emergency equipment had been cleared away. The frantic voices were gone. Only the steady rhythm of the heart monitor remained. Maya lay peacefully asleep beneath warm blankets, an oxygen mask covering her face. Beside the window stood 2 empty bassinets waiting for their tiny occupants to return from the NICU. Tasha looked at Maya for a long moment. Then she whispered so softly that no one else could hear, "You fought harder than anyone outside this room ever deserved." She adjusted Maya's blanket before quietly leaving. 41 hours later, Maya Briggs slowly opened her eyes. Everything felt heavy. The light seemed too bright. Her throat burned. For several seconds, she couldn't remember where she was. Then she saw Dr. Simone Admi. Not standing over her, not rushing toward another patient, simply sitting beside her bed, waiting. Later, Maya would say that was the exact moment she knew she was going to survive. Doctors only sat down when they planned to stay. Dr. Admi offered a gentle smile. "Welcome back." Maya blinked slowly. "My baby." Her voice barely existed. Dr. Admi reached over and carefully squeezed her hand. "There are some things I need to tell you." She waited until Maya looked directly into her eyes. "I'm going to tell you everything. And I'll stay right here while I do." Maya nodded weakly. For the first time since her heart had stopped, she wasn't afraid. Because somehow, she already trusted the woman sitting beside her. Dr. Admi didn't rush. Years of experience had taught her that life-changing news should never be delivered in a hurry. She waited until Maya seemed fully awake before speaking again. "You suffered a severe placental abruption," she said gently. "Your heart stopped for several minutes during surgery, but we were able to bring you back." Maya closed her eyes. She remembered flashes, the pain, the bright lights, then, nothing. "My baby," she whispered again. A warm smile spread across Dr. Admi's face. "Your babies." Maya frowned in confusion. "Babies?" Dr. Admi nodded. "You gave birth to twin girls." For several seconds, Maya simply stared. Then tears slowly filled her eyes. "I had twins?" "You did," Dr. Admi smiled. "And they're both alive." Maya covered her mouth as tears rolled down her cheeks. She couldn't speak. She simply cried. Not from fear, but from overwhelming relief. "The first little girl is receiving breathing support in the NICU," Dr. Admi explained softly. "The second is already breathing on her own. They're both getting stronger every hour." Maya closed her eyes again. "They're really alive?" "They're waiting to meet their mother." A few hours later, the NICU staff carefully wheeled Maya upstairs. Nurse Tasha had quietly arranged everything long before anyone asked. She believed Maya deserved to see her daughters the moment she was strong enough. The room was peaceful. Soft lights. Gentle beeping monitors. Tiny incubators lined the walls. One nurse carefully lifted the first baby into Maya's arms. Moments later, the second little girl rested against her other shoulder. For several long minutes, no one spoke. Maya simply looked at them. Two tiny faces. Two impossible miracles. "They were both inside me," she whispered, "the whole time." "The whole time," Dr. Admi answered. "I watched over both of them since the 21st week." Maya smiled through tears. "Thank you." The room fell quiet again. After several moments, Maya looked toward Dr. Admi. "What happened with Dex?" Dr. Admi remained silent for a moment. She believed patients deserved honesty, but never more than they were strong enough to carry. Carefully, she told Maya everything. She explained how Dex spent most of the night outside the room. She explained what Nurse Tasha had overheard. She explained the conversation about the house. She explained Farah. She explained everything. When she finished, Maya didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't ask questions. She simply looked down at her daughters. The silence lasted almost a full minute. Finally she spoke. "I want a lawyer." She lifted her eyes. "Before I ever speak to my husband." Dr. Admi nodded immediately. "I'll arrange it." There wasn't a second of hesitation. The lawyer arrived on the fourth day. By then, Maya had already made several decisions. Every legal document was reviewed. Her financial accounts were secured. Emergency contacts were changed. Hospital staff statements were preserved. Even the visitor log from the night of the surgery was copied and added to her legal file. For the first time in years, Maya wasn't reacting, she was preparing. Dex finally arrived on the fifth day. He carried an expensive bouquet wrapped in elegant brown paper. His smile looked practiced. His apology sounded rehearsed. He stepped quietly into the room. Maya. She looked at him without emotion. Sit down. He obeyed. For nearly 2 hours he spoke. He apologized. He blamed stress, fear, confusion, and he even blamed the hospital. Maya listened without interrupting. When he fully finished, she calmly slid a folder across the bedside table. Inside were legal papers. Divorce documents. Temporary custody requests. Financial protection orders. And written statements describing exactly what had been overheard outside room 7. Dex opened the folder. His confidence disappeared. This isn't what you think, he said quietly. Maya looked directly into his eyes. No. Her voice was calm. It's exactly what I know. The room fell silent. For the first time, Dex had nothing left to say. He slowly stood. His flowers remained on the chair beside the door. Without another word, he walked away. He never looked back. After the door closed, Maya glanced at the bouquet. Then she looked toward Nurse Tasha. Would you mind? Tasha smiled gently. It would be my pleasure. The flowers disappeared into the trash. A few days later, Maya chose names for her daughters, Ri and Ren. They were her grandmother's middle names, names that reminded her where real strength came from. Ri slept peacefully almost all day. Ren seemed fascinated by sunlight pouring through the hospital window, staring at it with wide, curious eyes. Maya smiled. It's okay, she whispered. We've got all the time in the world. During the 12 days Maya remained in the hospital, Dr. Admi visited every single day. Sometimes she stayed only a few minutes, sometimes much longer. She never made those visits feel like routine. On Maya's final afternoon, the room was quiet. Both babies were asleep. Golden sunlight spilled across the floor. Dr. Admi sat beside the bed once more, just like she had on the day Maya woke up. Maya looked at her. You stayed. Yes. You never gave up. Never. You already knew about both girls. I did. And you still kept fighting. Dr. Admi smiled gently. There was never another choice. Maya looked at her daughters, then back at the woman who had saved all 3 of their lives. Thank you. The words were simple, but they carried everything she couldn't put into language. Dr. Admi nodded quietly. They're going to do amazing things one day. Maya smiled. I think they already have. Years later, Ri and Ren would never remember the machines, the surgery, or the hallway where strangers quietly waited for their mother to die. They would never remember the silence that surrounded room 7. But they would live every single day because 3 people made very different choices that night. One doctor refused to give up. One nurse refused to ignore what she heard. And one mother refused to surrender after death itself had tried to claim her. Dex came to the hospital believing he was about to inherit a house. Instead, he lost the only family that had ever truly been his. Maya walked out of those hospital doors holding far more than 2 beautiful daughters. She walked out carrying the truth, her freedom, and a second chance at life. Because sometimes, the greatest inheritance isn't money. It isn't property. It isn't a house. It's the courage to begin again. And on that unforgettable night, life chose all 3 of them. If Maya's story, Dr. Admi's dedication, and the ultimate victory of those 2 little lives touched your heart, please give this video a like. Share this story with your friends and family, with anyone who might need a reminder today that even when things seem completely over, a beautiful, stubborn new beginning can still happen. And if you want to experience more powerful, deep, and dramatic stories just like this one, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload. What did you think of Dex's karma and Maya's strength? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.